Mr. Sneeze, being the fifth Mr. Man book, is definitely one that I read a lot as a child because I read the complete collection a lot. It taught me to read, basically. I remember it in the sense that I recognized the character, but I couldn't remember the story. So when I sat down to read it, I didn't know what to expect. And actually, I feel like it doesn't necessarily give the best message. In a way, it does, but in a way, it doesn't. So it starts off with an introduction to Mr. Sneeze, and we realize that he lives in a very cold location and he always has a red nose and he's always sneezing. I love well, I love the design of that house, but I also love that bit of onomatopoeia there with the tissue. He says a tissue quite frequently. It's definitely something that young children reading along with it can mimic, can copy the sounds of. It gives it an element of interactivity. But he's walking along and realizes that when he leaves areas where there is no snow, his red nose begins to go away. And he meets this wizard. And this wizard character does appear in Mr. Men books from time to time. To be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of this character. But he meets this wizard. And this wizard says, "Preposterous. You can't live somewhere where there's only snow 24/7. Don't be ridiculous." And Mr. Sneeze said, "Well, actually, I live in cold land. That is exactly what it's like." As you can see there, which I imagine is something children have probably coloured in quite a few times. And the wizard says, "Okay, well, prove it." And Mr. Sneeze takes him to cold land and a tissue. He sneezes again. And the wizard says, "We will take the snow away." And Mr. Sneeze stops sneezing. And I think, on the one hand, it's a really interesting story because it tells young children about colds and why you might sneeze a lot more in winter and how the cold weather can affect you. And obviously that's a really important lesson to learn because I imagine it's quite scary if you're sneezing and sniffling and you don't know why. But the wizard banished the snow. He doesn't look as fun without his red nose, but he got rid of the snow. And I don't feel like getting rid of the snow was the best solution because snow is also a wonderful thing and children love snow. He should have taught Mr. Sneeze to wrap up warm. That would have been a much more sensible lesson. It would have had the same impact. He could have found ways for Mr. Sneeze to learn to protect himself and look after his health when the cold weather is there. Because really, a child can't really, mimic this and get rid of the snow. So on the one hand, I like that it's teaching about colds and flus and, what it means if you've got a red stuffy nose. But at the same time, I feel like the solution wasn't as good or as useful as it could have been. He should have had on hats and mittens. I've only just realised he doesn't have any arms. Scarf and a hat then. It would have made a lot more sense. But generally, it's not a bad book.